My name is Alexandra, and I am 29 years old. For the past 18 months, I have been providing free childcare for my sister Emma's 3 children, while my own life spiraled into a nightmare of exploitation and manipulation. Last night, when Emma screamed at me for the final time, saying, "You're unemployed anyway. Stop complaining so much!" I finally reached my breaking point. I packed my bags and left their house, but not before telling them I would no longer be their unpaid servant. What would you do if your family treated you like free labor instead of a person with your own dreams and aspirations? Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Last Vengeance to hear more real life stories that might reflect your own experiences. To understand how I ended up in this situation, you need to know about my family dynamics. My sister Emma is 35 years old, 6 years older than me, and has always been the golden child in our family. From childhood, she was treated like a princess who could do no wrong. Her husband Mike, 37, works in construction, but has never been particularly reliable when it comes to work or responsibility. Together, they have 3 children, Jake, who is 8, Sophie, who is 6, and little Lily, who just turned 3. My mother, Rose, 62, is a retired elementary school teacher who has always favored Emma in the most obvious ways. Dad passed away when I was 16, and since then, Emma has been able to manipulate Mom into believing she can do no wrong. Growing up, while Emma received praise for mediocre grades, I was expected to excel without recognition. When Emma got pregnant at 21, it was celebrated as a blessing. When I focused on my career instead of settling down, I was constantly reminded that I was getting older and wasting my life. The contrast in treatment was painful but not surprising. Emma received financial help from Mom whenever she needed it. When she and Mike bought their house, Mom contributed to the down payment. When their car broke down, Mom was there with a check. Meanwhile, I put myself through college, working 3 jobs, and graduated with a degree in graphic design, completely on my own. After college, I built a decent career as a freelance graphic designer. I had regular clients, enough income to rent a nice apartment in the city, and the freedom to work from anywhere. I loved my independence and the creative control I had over my projects. My relationship with my family was cordial but distant. I visited for holidays and kept in touch, but I had learned early on that getting too involved in their drama was emotionally exhausting. Then, 18 months ago, everything changed. Emma called me in tears, explaining that their regular babysitter had quit unexpectedly, and they couldn't afford a replacement. Mike had been laid off from his construction job, and they were struggling to make ends meet. She begged me to help them out, just temporarily, until they could find a more permanent solution. "Alexandra, I'm desperate," she sobbed into the phone. "Jake starts 2nd grade next week, and I can't leave the younger ones alone. Could you possibly help us out for a few weeks? I know you work from home, so maybe you could watch them during the day." Against my better judgment, I agreed to help. I had always loved my nieces and nephew, and the idea of spending more time with them, while helping Emma through a rough patch, seemed like the right thing to do. Just temporarily, she had promised. Until we get back on our feet. I moved into their guest room, bringing my computer and work equipment with me. The plan was simple. I would watch the children during the day while Emma worked her part-time job at a local boutique, and in the evenings, I would focus on my freelance projects. It seemed manageable, even noble. The first week was actually enjoyable. Jake, Sophie, and Lily were sweet kids, and I found myself genuinely happy to spend time with them. I helped Jake with his homework, played pretend games with Sophie, and taught Lily new words. In the evenings, Emma and Mike would take over parenting duties while I worked on my design projects. But gradually, the boundaries began to blur. Alexandra, could you handle bath time tonight? I'm exhausted from work, became a nightly request. Can you get up with Lily if she has a bad dream? You're such a light sleeper. Turned into me becoming the default nighttime caregiver. Would you mind picking up groceries while you're out with the kids? Evolved into me becoming responsible for all household errands. Within a month, I was working as a full-time nanny, housekeeper, and personal assistant, all while trying to maintain my freelance business. My client work suffered as I struggled to find time between diaper changes, meal preparation, and endless loads of laundry. Conference calls were interrupted by crying children. Project deadlines were missed because of school pickup duties, and my creative energy was completely drained by the end of each day. When I brought up these concerns, Emma dismissed them. It's only temporary, Alexandra. Besides, your family. This is what family does for each other. The guilt trips were constant and effective. Any time I expressed frustration or suggested they find alternative childcare, I was reminded of how much they needed me and how selfish it was to abandon them during their time of need. Mike's attitude was even worse. He treated me like hired help, but without the benefits of being paid or respected. He would come home from his sporadic work days and criticize everything from how I had organized the children's toys to what I had prepared for dinner. In my house, we do things differently, he would say, as if I were an incompetent employee rather than a family member helping them out of love. The worst part was watching my own life slip away. Client relationships I had built over years began to deteriorate. Alexandra seems to be unavailable more often lately, one of my biggest clients mentioned, before ultimately choosing to work with someone else. My income dropped significantly, but I couldn't leave because Emma constantly reminded me that they were providing free room and board. Think of all the money you're saving on rent, she would say whenever I mentioned my declining income. Besides, spending time with the kids should be rewarding enough. Not everything is about money. But everything was about money for them. While I watched their children for free, Emma used her paycheck for shopping trips and spa days. I need some self-care after dealing with the stress of working and being a mom, she would explain, coming home with bags full of new clothes and beauty products. Mike, when he did work, spent his earnings on tools for his various hobbies and weekends out with his friends. Meanwhile, I was using my dwindling savings to buy groceries, children's clothes, and household necessities. When Lily outgrew her crib and needed a toddler bed, Emma looked at me expectantly. Could you handle that expense, Alexandra? You know how tight things are for us right now. I found myself purchasing furniture, toys, and even birthday presents for my own nieces and nephew while Emma and Mike acted as if these were gifts they were providing. The emotional manipulation was subtle but constant. The kids love you so much, Alexandra. Jake told his teacher that Aunt Alexandra is his favorite person in the whole world. These comments were designed to make me feel guilty about any thoughts of leaving, and they were devastatingly effective. I loved those children genuinely, and the idea of abandoning them felt monstrous. Even though I was the one being abandoned by everyone else in my life, my social connections deteriorated as I became unable to make plans or commitments. Sorry, I can't make dinner tonight. Sophie has a dance recital, became my standard response to friends' invitations. Date opportunities were non-existent, because I was essentially a single mother to 3 children who weren't even mine. My apartment in the city sat empty, while I paid rent on a place I couldn't even enjoy. The breaking point began to build when Mike found a new job, but their expectations of me didn't change. Well, you're already here and settled in, Emma reasoned when I suggested that maybe it was time for me to move back to my own place. The kids would be devastated if you left now. Besides, childcare is so expensive. You're saving us thousands of dollars. I realized then that my temporary help had become their permanent solution. They had no intention of finding alternative childcare or resuming full responsibility for their own children. I had become a convenient source of free labor, and they were planning to keep me in that role indefinitely. Things got worse when Emma decided to increase her hours at the boutique. "It's a great opportunity for more income," she announced, as if this change wouldn't completely overwhelm me. "You can handle the extra time with the kids, right? You're so good with them." Now I was responsible for 3 children from 7 a.m. when they woke up until 8 p.m. when Emma returned from her extended shifts. Breakfast, school runs, lunch preparation, afternoon activities, homework help, dinner, baths, bedtime stories, everything fell to me. My freelance work became impossible to maintain. I was working maybe 2 hours a day on my own projects, late at night when I was already exhausted. The final straw came last week when I discovered Emma had been telling people at her work that she had found the perfect childcare solution. When I confronted her about this, she was unapologetic. "What's wrong with being proud of our arrangement?" she asked. "You're great with kids and your family. It's a win-win situation." "It's a win for you," I corrected her. "What exactly am I winning? I've lost most of my clients. I'm using my savings to support your household. And I have no life of my own." "You have a roof over your head and food to eat," she replied defensively. "And you get to spend time with your nieces and nephew. That should mean something to you." "It does mean something to me, but it can't be my entire life. I need to rebuild my career and have some independence." "Independence?" Emma scoffed. "Alexandra, you're 29 years old and single. At least here you have purpose. What else would you be doing anyway?" Her words cut deep, because they revealed what she really thought of me. I wasn't a person with my own dreams and ambitions. I was just a convenient resource to be used for her family's benefit. The situation exploded yesterday when I told Emma I had a video call scheduled with a potential new client. It was the first promising lead I'd had in months, and I needed 2 hours of uninterrupted time to present my portfolio and discuss a major project. "Can't you reschedule it?" Emma asked casually. "I promised the kids we'd go to the park this afternoon." "Emma, this is important for my career. I haven't had a decent client prospect in months because I can never guarantee my availability." "Your career." She laughed mockingly. "Alexandra, let's be realistic. You're a freelance graphic designer who's been out of the game for over a year. This is probably just another dead end lead anyway. Whether it leads somewhere or not, I need to try. I can't keep living like this, completely dependent on you while simultaneously supporting your family." That's when she exploded. "Supporting us? You live here for free! We feed you, house you, and include you in our family. And all we ask is that you help with the kids, who adore you by the way. You're being incredibly selfish and ungrateful." "I'm not ungrateful. But I'm also not your employee. I'm supposedly your sister. But you treat me worse than you would treat hired help. If you hate it here so much, then leave," she screamed. "Go back to your empty apartment and your failed career. See how much better your life is without us." "Maybe I will," I replied quietly, surprising both of us. "You won't," Emma said with certainty. "You need us more than we need you. You're unemployed anyway, so stop complaining so much." Those words, "you're unemployed anyway," were the final nail in the coffin. She saw my sacrifice, my depleted career, my financial struggles, not as the cost of helping her family, but as evidence of my personal failure. In her mind, I should be grateful to be useful to someone since I was such a disappointment on my own. That night, after the children were asleep, I quietly packed my belongings. I had moved in with 2 suitcases 18 months ago, but somehow had accumulated more possessions, mainly gifts for the children and household items I had purchased. As I folded my clothes, I reflected on how much of myself I had lost in this house. I had intended to leave early in the morning, before anyone woke up, but Lily had a nightmare around 2 a.m. and came looking for me. She was used to me comforting her during bad dreams, and seeing her small, frightened face nearly broke my resolve. I held her until she fell back asleep, knowing it might be the last time. In the morning, I waited until Emma came downstairs for coffee before telling her I was leaving. "You're being dramatic," she said dismissively. "You'll be back by tonight, when you realize you have nowhere else to go." "I'm not being dramatic, Emma. I'm making a necessary change for my mental health and future." "What about the kids?" "Jake has a school project due tomorrow that he needs help with. Sophie has dance class on Thursday. Lily is still getting used to potty training, and she trusts you." Even in that moment, her primary concern was how my departure would inconvenience her, not the reasons why I felt I had to leave. "You're their mother, Emma. These are your responsibilities, not mine. I can't just call in sick to work because you're having a tantrum. Then find a babysitter, hire a nanny, do what other working parents do." "With what money?" she demanded. "Childcare costs more than I make at the boutique." "That's not my problem to solve anymore." Mike appeared in the kitchen then, attracted by our raised voices. "What's all this commotion about?" "Alexandra is abandoning us," Emma announced dramatically, "leaving us high and dry without any notice." "I've been here for 18 months, I corrected. "This is my notice." Mike shook his head disgustedly. "I knew this would happen eventually. You can't count on anyone these days." "You can count on people, Mike. Just not indefinitely and without reciprocation." "We gave you a place to live," he replied. "And I gave you free childcare, housekeeping, and grocery shopping for a year and a half. I think we're even." As I loaded my car, the children came outside in their pajamas, confused by the unusual activity. Jake, the oldest, seemed to understand that something significant was happening. "Are you moving back to your apartment, Aunt Alexandra?" he asked. "Yes, sweetheart, I am. But who's going to help me with my math homework?" The question nearly destroyed me. "Your mom and dad will help you. They're very smart." Sophie began to cry, not fully understanding the situation, but sensing the sadness in the air. Lily clung to my leg, repeating, "No go, Al! No go!" Emma stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, still convinced I would change my mind. "You're really going to leave them like this? They love you. I love them too," I said, tears streaming down my face. "But love shouldn't require me to sacrifice my entire future." "Fine," Emma said coldly. "But don't expect to come crawling back when you realize how hard it is out there on your own." I hugged each child goodbye, promising to visit soon, though I wondered if Emma would allow that. Then I got in my car and drove away from the house that had been both my prison and my home for the past year and a half. The first few days of freedom were disorienting. I had forgotten what it felt like to wake up naturally instead of to the sound of children's voices. My apartment, which had felt cramped before, now seemed luxuriously spacious and quiet. But the silence was also lonely and filled with guilt. Emma didn't contact me for the first week, probably expecting me to reach out first. When I didn't, She sent a series of increasingly desperate text messages. The kids are asking for you constantly. Lily cried for 2 hours yesterday. Jake's teacher wants to know why his homework isn't getting done anymore. Sophie refuses to eat dinner. She says your mac and cheese tastes better. I had to miss work because Mike couldn't watch all 3 kids by himself. Each message was designed to maximize my guilt and draw me back into their web of dependency. But I had learned to recognize manipulation tactics, and I stayed strong. Instead of responding to Emma's guilt trips, I focused on rebuilding my professional life. I reached out to former clients, explaining my extended absence and expressing interest in new projects. Some relationships had been permanently damaged, but others were surprisingly understanding. "We wondered what happened to you," one client said during a phone call. "You were always so reliable before, and then suddenly you became impossible to reach." "I was dealing with a family situation that got out of hand," I explained. "But I'm fully available now and eager to get back to work." Within 2 weeks, I had secured 3 small projects, not enough to fully support myself immediately, but a promising start. The creative energy I had lost during my time as an unpaid nanny began to return as I immersed myself in design work again. Emma's messages became more frequent and increasingly accusatory. "Mike had to take unpaid leave to watch the kids. We can't afford this. You're being incredibly selfish. Family is supposed to support each other. The kids keep asking when you're coming home." What am I supposed to tell them? "Mom thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe you should see a therapist." That last message prompted me to finally respond. "Emma, I am not having a breakdown. I'm reclaiming my life. If you need childcare, hire a babysitter or put the kids in daycare like other working parents." "We can't afford professional childcare," she replied immediately. "Then adjust your lifestyle or find a better paying job. This is not my responsibility." "How can you be so cold? These are your niece and nephew we're talking about. And you're my sister." But that didn't stop you from exploiting me for 18 months. The conversation ended there, but the guilt trips continued through other family members. Mom called several times, having received Emma's version of events. "Alexandra, Emma tells me you abandoned her family without warning. That doesn't sound like you." "It's not without warning, Mom. I told Emma multiple times that I needed to rebuild my career and couldn't continue providing full-time childcare indefinitely. But they're family, sweetheart. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family. I made sacrifices for 18 months, Mom. I sacrificed my career, my social life, my independence, and my savings. At what point is it enough?" There was silence on the other end before Mom spoke again. "Emma says you were living there for free. I was living there as their unpaid employee. There's a difference. She also mentioned that you weren't contributing financially to the household." "Mom, I bought groceries, children's clothes, household supplies, furniture, and toys. I estimate I spent over $15,000 of my own money supporting their family while providing free labor." Another silence. "I didn't know about that part. Emma didn't mention it because it doesn't fit her narrative of me as a freeloader who abandoned them." Over the following weeks, other family members reached out with similar concerns, having heard only Emma's side of the story. Each conversation was exhausting but necessary. I found myself documenting everything: receipts for purchases I had made, screenshots of my declining client communications, records of the hours I had spent on childcare duties. The truth was more convincing than Emma's selective storytelling, and gradually, family members began to understand the real situation. My Aunt Linda was particularly supportive. "I suspected something was wrong," she told me during a long phone conversation. Emma has always been good at manipulating situations to her advantage. And you've always been too generous for your own good. I just wanted to help them through a difficult time. I explained. I never intended for it to become permanent. Of course you didn't. But Emma saw an opportunity to have free childcare and took advantage of your kindness. You were right to leave. A month after my departure, Emma's messages took on a different tone. Mike found a new job, but it doesn't start for 3 weeks. Could you possibly help us out until then? Just temporarily. The audacity of asking me to return, even briefly, after everything that had happened was astounding. But it also showed how little they had learned from the experience. No, Emma, I will not be providing childcare services anymore. You need to find alternative arrangements. What if we paid you? She offered. It's not about money. It's about respect and boundaries. I'm your sister, not your employee. But the kids miss you so much. Can't you at least visit? I did miss the children terribly, but I knew that any contact would be seen as an opening for manipulation. When you can respect my boundaries and treat me as an equal family member rather than free labor, we can discuss visits. 2 months after leaving, I received an unexpected call from Mike. Emma was at work, and he was home with all 3 children, struggling to manage them alone. Look, Alexandra. I know we didn't appreciate you enough when you were here, he began, sounding genuinely apologetic. I see now how much work you were doing and how hard it is to handle everything. Thank you for acknowledging that, I said, surprised by his honesty. The kids are having a really hard time adjusting. Lily still cries for you every night. Jake's grades are slipping because no one has time to help with homework. Sophie won't eat most of the meals Emma makes because she's used to your cooking. Each detail was painful to hear, but I maintained my resolve. I'm sorry they're struggling, Mike, but you and Emma are their parents. You need to figure out solutions. Would you consider coming back if we made some changes? Set up specific hours, maybe pay you something? No, Mike. I need to rebuild my career and my independence. I can't be responsible for your children's daily care anymore. I understand, he said quietly. I just wish we had handled things differently when you were here. His apology was more sincere than anything Emma had offered, and it gave me some closure about my decision to leave. 3 months after my departure, I was finally starting to feel like myself again. My freelance business was recovering, though slowly. I had landed a long-term project with a nonprofit organization that allowed for steady income while I rebuilt other client relationships. More importantly, I was rediscovering who I was outside of my role as caregiver. I started taking evening art classes, something I had always wanted to do, but never had time for. I reconnected with friends I had lost touch with during my time at Emma's house. I even went on a few dates, though nothing serious developed. The loneliness was real, especially during evenings and weekends when I would have been spending time with Jake, Sophie, and Lily. But the freedom to make my own choices and pursue my own goals was worth the temporary isolation. Emma's messages became less frequent, but more thoughtful. I've been thinking about what you said about boundaries and respect. Maybe we could talk sometime. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet, but her willingness to acknowledge the concept of boundaries was progress. 6 months later, Emma called instead of texting. Alexandra, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize. I'm listening, I said carefully. I've been in therapy since you left. The therapist helped me understand that I was taking advantage of your kindness and treating you unfairly. What prompted you to start therapy? Honestly, the kids. Jake wrote a story at school about his favorite person, and it was all about you. When the teacher asked why you didn't live with us anymore, he said you had to go away because mommy made you sad. It broke my heart to realize that my 8-year-old could see what I was too selfish to acknowledge. I felt tears building as I imagined Jake's innocent perspective on our family drama. The therapist helped me see that I was recreating some of the patterns from our childhood. Emma continued. How mom always expected you to be responsible while letting me off the hook. I did the same thing, and I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that, I managed to say. I know an apology doesn't fix everything, but I want you to know that we're managing on our own now. Mike and I take turns with childcare responsibilities. We found a part-time babysitter we can afford. The kids are adjusting, though they still ask about you constantly. How are they doing? Better than I expected, honestly. Jake's grades improved once Mike started helping with homework. Sophie discovered she likes cooking and helps me in the kitchen now. Lily is fully potty trained and sleeping through the night in her own bed. It sounded like the family was functioning, as they should have been all along, with parents taking responsibility for their own children. I'd like to visit them sometime, if that would be okay with you, I said. I'd love that, but only if you want to. No pressure, no expectations of babysitting or helping out. Just spending time together as family. A month later, I visited for the first time since leaving. The children were overjoyed to see me, though they had clearly adapted to life without me. Jake proudly showed me his improved report card. Sophie demonstrated her cooking skills by making us all pancakes. Lily gave me a picture she had drawn of our family, including me, but with me living in my own house. Emma and Mike were different too, more engaged with their children, more appreciative of each other, and more respectful toward me. They asked about my work and my life without expecting me to drop everything to help with theirs. You look happier, Emma observed as we sat on the porch while the kids played in the yard. I am happier, I agreed. It took leaving to remember who I am outside of taking care of everyone else. I'm sorry it took so long for me to see what I was doing to you. I'm sorry too, for letting it go on as long as I did. I should have set boundaries earlier, instead of building up resentment. Our relationship is still a work in progress. I visit regularly now, but always with clear expectations about my role. I'm Aunt Alexandra who loves them and enjoys spending time with them, not a backup parent or free childcare service. Most importantly, I've learned to recognize the warning signs of exploitation disguised as family obligation. When people who claim to love you consistently benefit from your sacrifices while offering nothing in return, that's not love, it's manipulation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stop enabling their dysfunction. By refusing to continue as their unpaid nanny, I forced Emma and Mike to step up as parents. The children are better off with engaged parents rather than overwhelmed aunt, and I'm better off with my independence and self-respect intact. If you're currently in a situation where family members are taking advantage of your kindness, remember that you have the right to set boundaries. Helping family shouldn't require you to sacrifice your entire future or lose yourself in the process. True family support is reciprocal and respectful, not one-sided exploitation. Your dreams and goals matter just as much as anyone else's. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, even if they share your DNA. But my story doesn't end there. What happened over the next year taught me even more about family dynamics, manipulation, and the long journey to true healing. About 8 months after I had started visiting Emma's family again, I noticed some concerning changes. During one visit, I overheard Emma on the phone with a friend, complaining about how difficult it was to manage work and 3 children. "I just don't understand why Alexandra won't help out more," she was saying. "She only works part-time now, and we're family. It's not like I'm asking for much." My heart sank as I realized that despite therapy and our conversations, Emma was still viewing me as a resource rather than a person with my own life and obligations. The old patterns were creeping back, just in more subtle ways. During that same visit, she casually mentioned that she had signed up Sophie for additional dance classes. "Of course, I'll need someone to pick her up on Tuesdays since I can't leave work early," she said, looking at me meaningfully. "Emma, I can't commit to a weekly responsibility like that," I said firmly. "My work schedule varies, and I have other commitments." Her face fell, and I could see the familiar frustration building. "It's just 1 day a week, Alexandra. Sophie really wants to do this, and we can't afford the after-school care program. Then maybe Sophie can't take the extra classes right now," I replied. "Or you need to find another solution." "You're being really selfish," she said, her voice taking on that sharp edge I remembered so well. "This is about your niece's happiness and development." I felt the old guilt trying to creep in, the familiar pressure to give in and make everyone else's life easier at my own expense. But I had learned to recognize these tactics now. "Emma, I love Sophie, but her extracurricular activities are your responsibility as her parent, not mine." The conversation ended awkwardly, and I could tell Emma was angry. Over the next few weeks, her texts became less frequent, and when I did hear from her, there was a cool, distant tone that reminded me of our childhood dynamics. It was around this time that I decided to start my own therapy. While I had successfully extracted myself from the immediate exploitation, I realized I still carried deep wounds from both my childhood and my recent experiences. I needed to understand why I had allowed myself to be used for so long and how to prevent it from happening again. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, helped me understand that my pattern of giving wasn't just about kindness. It was about a desperate need for approval and acceptance that stemmed from childhood neglect and favoritism. "You learned early that love was conditional," she explained during one of our sessions. "You believed that if you were useful enough, helpful enough, selfless enough, you would finally receive the love and validation you craved. But it never worked," I realized. "The more I gave, the more they expected, and the less they appreciated what I was doing. That's because you were trying to earn something that should have been freely given." Healthy love doesn't require constant proof of worthiness. These sessions were painful but illuminating. I began to understand that my relationship with Emma was built on a foundation of dysfunction that went back to our childhood. I had been cast in the role of the responsible one, the helper, the fixer, while she had been allowed to remain perpetually dependent and entitled. Meanwhile, my professional life was thriving in ways I hadn't experienced even before the whole nanny situation began. The nonprofit project had led to several other opportunities, and I was building a reputation for reliable, creative work. I had even hired a part-time assistant to help manage my growing client base. One evening, as I was working late on a particularly challenging project, I received a frantic call from Mike. "Alexandra, thank God you answered," he said, sounding panicked. "Emma's in the hospital. She collapsed at work and they're running tests. I'm here with her, but the kids are at home with Emma's friend Lisa, and she can only stay until midnight. Could you possibly come over and stay with them tonight?" My immediate instinct was to drop everything and rush to help. But I paused, remembering Dr. Martinez's advice about taking time to think before responding to crisis situations involving my family. What happened to Emma? I asked first. They think it might be stress-related. Her blood pressure was through the roof, and she's been having panic attacks. The doctors want to keep her overnight for observation. I'm sorry to hear that. That sounds really scary. So, can you help with the kids? I don't know what else to do. I looked around my apartment, at the project materials spread across my dining table, at the deadline schedule posted on my wall. 6 months ago, I would have immediately said yes, regardless of the impact on my own responsibilities. Mike, I have a major client presentation tomorrow morning that I'm not finished preparing for. Can Lisa stay longer if you pay her overtime? Or do you have other family members who could help? Come on, Alexandra, this is an emergency. Family comes first. There it was again, the same manipulation disguised as moral imperative. Family comes first. But only when it meant I should sacrifice for them. When had Emma ever put my needs first? I understand it's an emergency. But I also have professional obligations that I can't abandon. What about Emma's friends from work? Or neighbors? You're really going to choose a work presentation over helping your family when Emma is in the hospital? The guilt was heavy, but I held firm. I'm not choosing work over family. I'm maintaining professional boundaries while also suggesting alternative solutions for childcare. I offered to come over early the next morning, after my presentation, to help with the kids before school. But Mike was clearly disappointed and angry with my response. Fine, he said coldly. I guess we'll figure it out ourselves, like always. That night, I lay awake feeling terrible about my decision. The old voice in my head whispered that I was selfish, uncaring, a bad sister and aunt. But a newer, stronger voice reminded me that I had offered help within my boundaries, and that saying no to one request didn't make me a bad person. Emma turned out to be fine. Her collapse was indeed stress-related, and she was released the next morning. But the incident created a new rift in our relationship. She was hurt that I hadn't dropped everything to help with the kids, and I was frustrated that my boundaries were still not being respected. Dr. Martinez helped me process the situation. Families often test boundaries when they're first established, she explained. The crisis was real, but it was also an opportunity for them to see if you would revert to your old patterns under pressure. I felt so guilty, I admitted. What if something had been seriously wrong with Emma? Then Mike would have found another solution, just like any other parent does during emergencies. The fact that they immediately turn to you suggests they still see you as their primary backup plan rather than one option among many. This insight was both painful and freeing. I realized that until Emma and Mike developed their own support systems and took full responsibility for their family's needs, they would continue to view me as their safety net. The tension came to a head during Jake's 9th birthday party. I had been looking forward to the celebration, bringing Jake a carefully chosen gift and planning to spend the afternoon enjoying time with my nephews and niece. But when I arrived, it became clear that Emma had expectations beyond my simply attending as a guest. "Oh, good. You're here," she said immediately upon seeing me. "Could you help set up the decorations while I finish the cake? And maybe you could supervise the kids while they play games? I'm feeling overwhelmed." I looked around the backyard, where several other adults, parents of Jake's friends, were standing around chatting. Emma had help available, but she was defaulting to asking me to work instead of enjoy the party. "Emma, I'd like to just be Aunt Alexandra today, not the party helper," I said as gently as possible. "There are plenty of other adults here who could assist if needed." her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "I can't believe you won't help with your own nephew's birthday party." "I'm not refusing to help ever. I'm saying I'd like to attend as a guest today, the way everyone else is." The party proceeded awkwardly, with Emma making pointed comments about how some people don't help family and how she had to do everything herself. Several of the other parents seemed uncomfortable with the obvious tension, and I found myself questioning whether I should have just helped to avoid the drama. But Jake seemed happy with the party, and more importantly, he was excited to spend time with me, as his aunt rather than his caregiver. We played games together, and I was able to be fully present with him in a way I never could when I was responsible for managing everything. After the party, Emma confronted me directly. "I don't understand what's happened to you, Alexandra," she said. "You used to be so helpful and caring. Now you seem to only think about yourself." "I'm still helpful and caring, Emma. But I'm also a person with my own life and needs." "That sounds like therapy talk," she said dismissively. "Has your therapist been filling your head with ideas about how terrible your family is?" "My therapist has been helping me understand healthy relationships and boundaries." "Boundaries," she repeated mockingly. "That's all you talk about anymore. What about love? What about family loyalty?" "Healthy boundaries are part of love, Emma. They allow relationships to be sustainable and reciprocal." "Reciprocal," she scoffed. "Everything has to be transactional with you now." I realized then that Emma fundamentally misunderstood what I was trying to accomplish. She saw my new boundaries as punishment or selfishness, rather than as an attempt to create a healthier dynamic between us. Over the following months, our relationship remained strained. Emma would invite me to family gatherings but make passive, aggressive comments about my own availability and how busy I was with my own life. I continued to attend and tried to maintain a positive relationship with the children, but it was exhausting to constantly navigate Emma's resentment. The breakthrough came in an unexpected way. Lily, now 4 years old, was having behavioral problems at preschool. During one of my visits, I noticed her acting out in ways that seemed familiar: attention seeking behaviors, difficulty with boundaries, emotional outbursts when she didn't get her way immediately. "She's been like this for months," Emma complained to me. "I don't know what's wrong with her. She used to be such a sweet, easy child." I watched Lily interact with Emma and Mike, noticing patterns that made me uncomfortable. When Lily wanted something, she would escalate her demands until someone gave in to stop the tantrum. When she was asked to do something she didn't want to do, she would refuse until Emma or Mike eventually did it for her. "Have you considered that she might be responding to inconsistent boundaries?" I asked carefully. Emma bristled. "What do you mean?" "I notice that when she pushes back against rules, you often end up giving in or doing things for her to avoid conflict. She might be learning that persistence pays off." "Are you saying I'm a bad mother?" "Not at all. I'm saying that boundary setting is hard, and sometimes we inadvertently teach children that boundaries are negotiable when we're not consistent about enforcing them." Emma was defensive, but I could see her thinking about what I had said. A few weeks later, she called me with an update. "I've been working with Lily's teacher and trying to be more consistent about rules and consequences," she said. "It's been really hard, but her behavior is starting to improve." "That's great news. Alexandra, I think I owe you an apology. Not just about Lily, but about everything. I've been angry at you for setting boundaries, but watching how Lily responds to boundaries has made me realize that maybe boundaries are actually important for relationships." It was a small crack in Emma's wall of resistance. But it felt significant. I never wanted to hurt you by setting boundaries, Emma. I wanted to create a healthier relationship between us. I know that now. I think I was scared that if you didn't need us anymore, you'd stop loving us. Setting boundaries isn't about not needing people. It's about needing them in healthy ways. This conversation marked a turning point. Emma began to understand that my boundaries weren't rejections of her or the children, but rather attempts to create sustainable relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. She also started therapy herself, specifically focusing on parenting and family relationships. Through that work, she began to understand how our childhood dynamics had shaped both of our approaches to relationships. I never realized how much pressure I put on you growing up, she told me during one conversation. Mom always expected you to be responsible for everything, and I just accepted that as normal. We were both shaped by that dynamic, I replied. You learned that you could depend on others to handle difficult things, and I learned that my value came from being useful. That's not sustainable, though, is it? Eventually, the person doing everything gets burned out and resentful. Exactly. Which is why boundaries are actually protective of relationships, not destructive to them. It took almost a full year, but gradually Emma and I began to rebuild our relationship on a healthier foundation. She stopped expecting me to be available for every emergency or need. I stopped feeling guilty about having my own life and priorities. Most importantly, we both learned to communicate directly about our needs and expectations rather than operating through manipulation and guilt. The children adjusted well to these changes too. Instead of seeing me as their backup parent, they began to relate to me as their aunt, someone who loved them deeply but wasn't responsible for their daily care. This actually strengthened our relationships because my time with them became about fun and connection, rather than obligation and exhaustion. Jake, now 10, recently told me that he likes how I visit now better than when I lived with them. You seem happier, Aunt Alexandra, he said. And you play with us more because you're not always busy doing chores. His observation was perceptive and validating. By taking care of my own needs, I had become more emotionally available for genuine connection with all of them. My relationship with Mike improved as well. As he took on more parenting responsibilities, he developed greater appreciation for what I had been doing during my time as their unpaid nanny. He also became more involved with his children in meaningful ways, discovering aspects of fatherhood he had previously avoided. I used to think that working and providing financially was enough, he told me recently. But being present for homework, help and bedtime stories and dealing with tantrums, that's actually the real work of being a parent. My mother's understanding evolved more slowly. She had been deeply invested in the narrative that Emma needed extra help because she had 3 young children and a demanding life. Mom struggled to accept that I had legitimate grievances about how I had been treated. But as she watched Emma and Mike become more capable and independent parents, and as she saw how much healthier my relationship with the family had become, she began to acknowledge that my boundaries had actually benefited everyone. I suppose you were right to stand up for yourself, she admitted during a recent phone call. Emma has become much more confident as a mother since she stopped relying on you for everything. It wasn't about being right or wrong, Mom. It was about creating relationships that work for everyone involved. Looking back now, almost 2 years after I left Emma's house that night, I can see how much all of us have grown. Emma has developed skills and confidence she never would have gained if I had continued to enable her dependence. Mike has become a more engaged father. The children have learned that healthy relationships involve mutual respect and clear expectations. And I have learned that self-care isn't selfish, it's essential. By taking care of my own needs and maintaining my own identity, I become better able to show up authentically in my relationships with others. My freelance business has grown beyond anything I had imagined possible. I now have a steady roster of clients, have hired 2 part-time employees, and am considering expanding into workshop facilitation for other creative professionals. The financial security I've built gives me genuine choices about how I spend my time and energy. More importantly, I've learned to recognize the early warning signs of exploitative relationships and to address them before they become entrenched patterns. I've developed friendships and professional relationships based on mutual respect and reciprocity. I've even started dating someone who understands and respects my boundaries, something I never would have thought possible during my days as an unpaid nanny. The most profound change, though, has been internal. I no longer define my worth by how useful I am to others. I don't need to earn love through sacrifice and self-neglect. I understand that healthy relationships require both giving and receiving, both supporting others and accepting support for myself. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the 18 months I spent as Emma's unpaid nanny. The honest answer is complicated. I regret how long I allowed the exploitation to continue. I regret the damage to my career and the isolation from my own life during that period. I regret the financial cost and the emotional toll. But I don't regret the lessons I learned about myself, about family dynamics, and about the importance of boundaries. I don't regret the deeper relationship I eventually developed with the children, or the growth that all of us experienced as a result of the crisis. Most of all, I don't regret finding the courage to walk away when walking away was the only path toward healing. If you're currently in a situation where family members or others are taking advantage of your generosity, please know that you have the right to set limits. It's not selfish to have your own goals and priorities. It's not cruel to expect reciprocity in relationships. It's not abandonment to stop enabling other people's dysfunction. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stop making other people's problems easier to ignore. By refusing to be the solution to everyone else's challenges, you create space for them to develop their own strength and capabilities. Change is possible, but it requires courage, the courage to disappoint people who have grown accustomed to your endless availability, the courage to prioritize your own well-being, even when others call you selfish, and the courage to believe that you deserve relationships based on respect rather than exploitation. Your life matters. Your dreams matter. Your boundaries matter. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, no matter how they're related to you or how much they claim to need you. Have you ever found yourself trapped in a situation where family took advantage of your generosity? How did you handle setting boundaries with people you love? What advice would you give to someone currently struggling with similar dynamics? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to Last Vengeance for more real life stories about standing up for yourself, reclaiming your independence, and building healthier relationships with the people you love.